All right. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let me see here off to the side. I've got a notification. All right, I will be right back. Okay, cool, no problem. All right, so we're gonna get rock and rolling here. Today, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was doing a cooling system pressure test. It's kind of the next task on our task list. We've been working through the cooling systems under engine repair. So I figured it would make sense just to do that today. Please excuse the cold breath you can see. My shop's a little cold right now, but we're out here in my shop at home. Since it's virtual Wednesday, we're all at home working. I didn't want to just assign another asynchronous assignment and just give you a worksheet to do. I know we do that sometimes, but I figured, you know what? Today's a good chance to use some things I have at home, utilize my shop, and get you guys a live demonstration. So with that said, cooling system pressure testing. We've been going over cooling system maintenance checks. Now your task for this covers everything we've been going over, but we've been breaking it down into smaller little tasks. So we've checked coolant strength. We've learned how to check freeze protection with a hydrometer, with a refractometer. You guys looked up and discussed pH strips and electrolysis testing with a voltmeter. So next step is we're going to go ahead and do a cooling system pressure test. What I want you guys to remember is on a cooling system pressure test, we can be using this for a couple different reasons. More than likely, if you're doing a cooling system pressure test, you're going to be trying to diagnose a leak. You're going to have a customer concern coming to shop stating that they have a leak or a coolant loss, or they smell coolant, or their car's overheating, or they have no heat coming out of the dash, some sort of a cooling system related concern. But this is also something that you can do as a regular maintenance item to just check and make sure that your cooling system is operating at its optimal capabilities. So with that said, sometimes, every few oil changes before wintertime and before summertime, maybe you want to bring your car in and do a cooling system pressure test just to check and make sure that there's nothing that you haven't noticed yet. Find a problem before it is a problem type of deal. With customers, when they come in for multi-point inspection, 9 times out of 10, the multi-point inspection sheet does not require you to do a pressure test. It wants you to check the strength of the coolant and the level. If you go a little further with that and do a cooling system pressure test, ask the customer if they would like to do that as a maintenance check, then maybe you might be able to uncover a problem before it becomes a problem. Let me let a few more people in here. All right, so you want to maybe find a problem for a customer before it becomes a problem. But more than likely when you're doing this test, you're actually testing to find a problem. So, or make sure that there's not a problem. After I do cooling system services, flushes, drain and fills, replace a water pump, a hose, anything, any type of a repair service to the cooling system, I like to end it with a cooling system pressure test just to make sure and verify that I no longer have any problems or I did not create any problems. Make sure I tightened everything up and I didn't create any leaks. So that's another way you might be using this, okay? So first and foremost, I'm gonna get you guys set up here. Bear with me, I'm just trying to prop this iPad up here. I don't have a tripod set up yet. So we're going to be doing this on my 2002 GMC Sonoma I have here in the shop. So previously ahead of time, I had driven this, the vehicle was warm. So when I brought it in the shop, I let it cool down, let the pressure drop before I cracked the radiator cap, right? So we wanna make sure we don't have extreme pressure on this radiator cap, because if we crack it, we could get burned when it boils over and blows out. So I checked as we've stated before, I checked the upper radiator hose, make sure there's not a lot of pressure on it. It's not, it's cooled down. You could always go as far as taking an infrared thermometer, which you'll see in a later lesson, verifying coolant temperature. You could use this and check at the thermostat, the radiator cap, the upper hoses in various places to see what the temperature is. This, I can assure you, is cooled down. Although I know it's cooled down, I am still going to use a rag to crack this loose. There's no pressure. We're going to go ahead and take the radiator cap off. I always take a quick look at the radiator cap. A lot of times if there's crud or contamination in the radiator, it'll show up here on the top of the cap because the stuff tries to tend to rise up to the top of the radiator, and that can be, if it looks real muddy or clumped up right there, that's a good inclination that we may have a problem with the system or it's time for a full cooling system flush. This one looks pretty good, it's not too bad. I have noticed that this vehicle, the cooling system does not seem to be operating quite as it should. On hot days, it seemed to be getting hot quicker and a little hotter than normal, not completely overheating, but getting warmer than normal. So we're going to take a look, see if we can find something while we're doing this too. Also, little disclaimer, I have created a leak on this vehicle for this demonstration. So this vehicle, when I first tested it before the demo, it did not have a leak. I created a small leak. We're going to see if we can find where I created that leak on camera to represent how you would test for a cooling system leak. All right. So one of the first things we do is I always just go ahead, if I'm doing a cooling system pressure test, check the strength of the coolant, which we've gone over already. I do a quick visual inspection of the components. A lot of times if there's a coolant leak or has been a coolant leak, you can see it by just doing a visual inspection. So you may be able to see on a hose, a heater hose around a thermostat housing, an intake manifold gasket, timing cover, or a water pump. You might be able to see coolant leaks. And even if you cannot see a right now coolant leak, you may be able to see some evidence that there has been a leak. And by evidence, I mean there may be a trail, a little trail of gunk coming down, a little trail of, this uses an orange coolant from Dexcool, a Dexcool brand coolant. So it may have a little orange crusty trail. That's a good sign that there's possibly a leak there. So that's where I would be looking. All right. This one, I did not see any leaks anywhere. It's solid. So we were in pretty good shape, other than the leak that I've created to show for this demonstration. So we've done our visual inspection. We've looked it over. I'm going to take you over here and show you guys the tool real quick. See if I can figure this out. All right. So over here on the workbench or the tool cart, I have a few cooling system tools set up. As I told you, I went ahead and checked strength earlier. It is a little weak. It needs to be. It was only good to about, I think, what was it, -10, -7 degrees Fahrenheit. So I am more than likely going to do a drain and fill on this, as you saw in the video for class the other day previously, and try to fix that coolant freeze protection. We have my basic Stant cooling system pressure test kit out here. We have one of these at the school. We have Snap-on ones at the school that look exactly the same. This is a great basic kit to get. Any entry-level technician starting out, when they come to me and they ask me, what are some special tools? I've got a good set of hand tools and things like that. What are some specialty tools that I should get? This is one of them, because this can give you a lot of information. You can use this to diagnose coolant leaks, just if the system's working properly, if the radiator cap's good. And I've also used these to diagnose head gasket problems, and I'll discuss that here in a little while. Here is another version that I have. This is a little more advanced version. This is a air operated one that you hook to your air hose, and the air creates a vacuum or creates pressure and puts pressure on the system with a regulator. It has a little needle valve here and different adapters for different vehicles. No, this is not every adapter for every vehicle. I have adapter sets at the school, and I need to buy more because we always run into something we don't have. There's cases and cases of different adapters. Back in the day, most radiator caps look like your standard radiator cap, and all you needed was this and this. Nowadays, we need all kinds of different fancy tools. So this is a basic tool we're going to use today. On a standard radiator and standard style radiator cap like we have on this GMC Sonoma, we can just go ahead and use this. When we're testing the cap, we can use the cap adapter right here that I have. On later model GM and pretty much all later model vehicles in general, you started to see threaded radiator caps and threaded surge tank caps. That's where these adapters are going to come into play. So this is a GM threaded surge tank adapter. And me being a GM technician, that's why I have these in my kit. Here is the adapter to thread the cap on to test the cap. So before we get started here, let me take you over and show you a little bit more of what I'm talking about. For example, hopefully you guys can see this screen. If you cannot see my screen on the share mode, please speak up and let me know. Here is what I mean by a threaded radiator cap or surge tank cap. You guys have all seen these because most of the modern cars have these type of a cap. They're a threaded cap that goes onto a form of a surge tank. All right, so that's why we needed the different adapters. Now, Let me get this off of here. Cam said let me check the chat box real quick. Cam said he needs let in the call. Let me look. I don't see anybody out there that needs admitted. So if you guys could tell him to try again and see if we can go from there. I don't see anybody having an issue in there. All right. Now, see if I can get my camera squared away here. It looks like my camera froze. All right, camera froze. Sorry about that, guys. So those are some different adapters that we're going to talk about for whatever vehicles you're seeing. If you're in a dealership, more than likely you're only going to need a small amount of adapters, 1, 2, maybe 3 different types of adapters for the vehicles and brands that you work on. If you're going to the independent side of things, you may need big cases with different types of adapters because you don't know what vehicle is going to come in the door. All right. So I'm going to try and get you guys set up here. And like I said, if you guys lose me, can't hear me, have any questions, and I'm just rambling away over here, please just unmute yourself, speak up, and then we'll get it taken care of. I saw a message in there a minute ago about Cam needing let into the meeting. You know, if you guys could just go ahead and tell him that I don't see him in there. He looks like he's in now maybe, so we'll go from there. All right, so hopefully you guys can see where we're at. And what I'm going to do at this point is first, I'm actually going to just test the radiator cap because I have a suspicion that my radiator cap may be getting weak or has failed with the cooling system issues that I am seeing back in the summertime. So what we're going to use is our adapter, and we're going to put our adapter on our tester. This tester has a valve right here where this releases pressure, that puts tension on it and helps build pressure. So all we're going to do now is we're going to take our radiator cap and install it as if it was on the neck of the radiator. We need to take a look and see what the spec is. The spec on this one is 15 PSI. So this should hold pressure up to 15 PSI. Over 15 PSI, it should start to open and bleed off pressure. So if this sticker is not on there, it has an aftermarket cap that doesn't say, you run into an issue where you just don't know what the pressure spec is, look it up in the service manual. It will tell you what the system pressure is. If you're replacing the radiator cap, you can get different pressure caps. Make sure you're getting the correct one for your vehicle and your specifications. So all we're going to do to test this is I'm going to go ahead and set this down and see if I can't get a good camera up here. In fact, let me just flip the screen around real quick for you. And I will try to get this on the screen the best I can. So we got our radiator cap sitting there ready to rock and roll. We're looking at our screen. I know it's hard to see on here, but it tells you on this one, test cooling system at the arrow heads. We are testing the cap. So if you look at these marks up here, they say cap. This one over here in the yellow says 15 to 16 PSI in that general area. So somewhere in that range, it should build pressure up to there and hold. When over that range, it should start to bleed off back to that pressure. So let's see what happens. As you can see, that cap is not holding pressure. It's bleeding off. So as I suspected, I have a faulty radiator cap here. That I'll run over to Advanced Auto Parts after our meeting, go over and grab another cap, throw it on, and it should take care of any of the cooling system gremlins that I've been experiencing. Now, let me show you a good cap. I'm just going to go ahead and take the cap off of my 06 GTO. Even though it's a fairly late model car, it still has an old style cap. It doesn't have a surge tank. We're going to install this one. This one says 18 PSI is the pressure spec. So we're going to go ahead and set that there. We're going to open this up. And as you can see, it builds and holds pressure just like it should. And usually a cap will go 1 to 2 PSI, sometimes over. That's actually over a little bit. I wouldn't want to see it go over any more than that. because that could cause problems too if it doesn't open properly. So let me reset this and show you guys once again. 18 PSI system. As you can see, I pumped that up. When it gets up to about 17, 18 PSI, I'm pumping it, but it now won't let it go any higher. It's opening the valve and bleeding the pressure off. It's in the 17 to 19 range. So this pressure cap is good. We're gonna bleed the pressure off. Take the adapter, go ahead and take this cap off, put it back in the kit. Now, get you guys turned around here again. If your pressure cap is not, your cooling system cannot make the correct pressure, you are going to experience problems. There's going to be multiple customer concerns that there could be with that. If it's not pressurizing correctly, the car can boil over sooner. So with that said, in the summertime, this is extremely important. Cars may come in overheating, and it may be something as simple as a faulty pressure cap. Just as important as it is to allow it to build the right pressure and operate correctly, it is just as important to make sure it bleeds off pressure if there is too much pressure. This is basically a regulator that's regulating the pressure in the cooling system. It has to have pressure in the system to operate correctly. So when we're done here, I have a little assignment with 5 questions for you guys. There's going to be a question involving radiator caps and pressure in the system. I'm going to need you guys to try to remember what we talked about here in class today, and also use your resources, your CDX chapter 17. There's a learning objective for this task in there to check and make sure you understand why it is important to have the correct pressure on the system. And I'm going to have a couple questions for you guys. Now let's just go ahead and get started real quick, jump right into our cooling system pressure test. I always start with it release position just to make it a little easier to install. The cooling system is topped off. You guys can't see it, but before the meeting started, I went ahead and made sure it was topped off and only needed a little bit in it. So it's in good shape. We go ahead and we install this as we would a radiator cap, close the valve, and we are going to pump pressure on this. Now remember, this system is 15 PSI. So we do not want to go over 15 PSI. Now what we are going to do is I'm going to bring the camera over and show you guys what we have going on here. All right, so now what I would do as a diagnostic is I would leave this sit for a period of time. I usually set it for, a solid 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes longer if I'm having trouble finding a leak. 15 minutes is usually good, and I'll come back over periodically and I'll check this gauge. I have it set to the 15 PSI mark on the arrow right here, and I'll watch this to see if it drops slowly. This should hold pressure for the 15 minutes. Now, don't be fooled if the vehicle is warm when you do this, and then as you let it sit, the temperature changes in the cooling system, the pressure will change directly with the temperature. So if it's a little lower or a little higher when you come back to it in a few minutes, don't be alarmed. What you're looking for is a significant and steady drop, which I can see this one already is dropping. That blue mark right there is where I had it, and you can see it's already dropping a couple PSI. So we're going to go ahead and look around here and see what we can find. So when you're doing this, you want to look around, obviously the radiator, in case the radiator's cracked anywhere, see if there's any leaks down the sides. You want to check around the hoses, especially since this has original radiator hoses on it at over 100,000 miles. They're overdue. So I want to make sure there's no leaks there. You want to check around the heater hoses that go to the heater core. Make sure there's no leaks around there. Follow them all the way around. Look underneath the vehicle and make sure there's no antifreeze or coolant running out of the block because maybe the block is leaking. A lot of these modern cars, well, in fact, all these modern cars have knock sensors. Knock sensors sometimes are right in a coolant passage, and when those start to leak, I've seen coolant leak out around knock sensor gaskets. So you want to check around the block everywhere, see if you see any leaks. Thermostat housing right here. And I'm going to look around the bypass hoses, and there we can see we have our leak. The top of the water pump is wet. So now, first glance, people might think, oh, it needs a water pump. No. We need to look a little further deeper into this. So what it's actually doing is this bypass hose here. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's running down around the bottom of this bypass hose. So the actual problem is this hose. Now, is the hose the problem? Is the clamp the problem? I'm going to give you guys a little heads up. I took a 1.5 turns to 2 turns off of this clamp and wiggled the hose, and that was enough to create that leak. So that's what our leak is. But maybe the hose is bad. Maybe the clamp is bad. Maybe there's just corrosion on the fitting that it goes onto. Whatever it may be, there is a leak there, and we can see that. They may not always have a stream of fluid shooting out of them. You might have to look very carefully. I've had leaks where I could not tell exactly which hose it was coming out of, if it was running out of the hose and down, or what component it was leaking from. And I've actually had to add a cooling system dye to the system, run the vehicle, and then repressure test it and trace the dye with a black light or an ultraviolet light to verify where the leak's coming from. This one's pretty obvious. I could see it. It's hard to see on camera, but I could see it dripping down out of here and running down this pipe onto the water pump. So we have found our leak. We'll come back over and check out our gauge, and as you can see, it is still steadily dropping. Now, the other thing I said earlier was I've used this gauge to check for head gasket problems. What will happen with that is you would leave this on here, but we would relieve the pressure so it has no pressure. You install this on the full radiator on the suspect vehicle. You start the car up and let it warm up, and you are watching the whole time it's running. You're watching this gauge. If while the vehicle is running, this starts to build pressure, that is telling you that there is probably a blown head gasket or a cracked head or something of that nature where combustion is getting into the radiator or the cooling system. So combustion pressure is pushing into the cooling system and building pressure. Also, maybe not at idle, you don't see it, but I've snap throttled it a few times like we did in our vacuum test, and I snap throttled it wide open and lit off. If you start to see pressure, or as you slowly go up to 2,500 RPMs, it slowly starts to build pressure, that's a good indication that you have a possible head gasket failure. So this tool can be used for a maintenance check. It can be used to diagnose cooling system problems and leaks, and it can also be used to diagnose engine problems, internal engine problems. It's just another tool to have in your toolbox to use for various diagnostic purposes. All right, so I'm gonna get you guys set back up over here. So as of right now, we know this vehicle has 2 problems. One I created and one that I was not aware of that we found today. So that's good. I'm going to go ahead and fix that leak. It may be as something on a customer's car as simple as replacing the hose, a clamp, a component. This one's just going to be as simple as tightening up the clamp and rechecking. Now, when I recheck, I want to make sure I take some clean water and wash all that coolant off of there. So when I recheck, I make sure I'm getting an accurate visual reading of if it's not leaking or if it is. Remember, I always am a stickler about cleaning up after yourself on these vehicles, because if you leave fluid laying around there and you recheck it, you can't tell if it's still leaking or if it's from before. The customer will take it home and coolant will drip out on their driveway. They'll be upset thinking that their car is not fixed. So take the time to rinse stuff off, clean it up, get some degreaser, whatever you need to do to get it cleaned up. So I'm also going to have to replace this radiator cap because the cooling system is not operating at the correct pressure. It's not building pressure. Changing pressure of the cooling system is going to directly change the boiling point. So I need to get this taken care of, which I will today. We've talked about the tools. We talked about how to do the task. And if you guys get a chance to look on your task list, I want you to see the task to perform cooling system pressure test, dye leak test, and checking coolant conditions. This is what we've been covering the last couple meetings that we have done. So when you get back in the shop and you do your task sheet on this in the lab, you will put all of this together and be able to diagnose a cooling system. Now, I do have some review questions for you guys that I want you to do. I'm going to cut this short. We're pretty much done here. This is a short, nice little demo, but I am going to show you what I would like you to do. So let me share my screen with you. Bear with me. I'm learning this on the iPad myself. All right, so all right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. If you cannot see my screen or something has changed, please speak up and let me know, and I'll take care of it. What I'm going to want you to do is answer these review questions. There's only 5 of them. You can use your resources to answer these. I don't expect you to answer them right off the top of your head. You remember from today's discussion, put that in there. There are a few things in here that I touched on, but did not go in depth on. This is the part of the lesson where I want you to perform some of your own research. So in CDX, in chapter 17, it is servicing the cooling system. If you go through there and read through your learning objectives in there, there will be answers to these questions. Don't just Google it and take the first answer that pops up on the screen. Do your proper research. All right, so the first question I want you to think about, how can a cooling system pressure test help diagnose cooling system problems? Answer that question for me. Number 2, is a pressure tester one size fits all? Yes or no? And please explain. Besides pressure testing the cooling system, what other components should be pressure tested? Answer that question for me. Number 4, explain why proper system pressure in a cooling system is required for it to function properly. This is the one that we touched on, but I need you to find a little more information. I mentioned boiling points, things like that, so dig a little deeper on that one for me. And number 5, how can a pressure test be beneficial used as a routine maintenance check? Explain that to me. How can it be beneficial to be used as a routine maintenance check? What I want you to do for your assignment is open a Word document or Google Docs if you're more comfortable with that. Copy over these questions. I'm going to post them in Schoology as soon as we get off here, and I will email them to you as well. Copy these questions over into your document and paste them in there. Then respond to each question and email them to me tomorrow by 2 p.m. Yes, no, not today by 2. I'm giving you till tomorrow at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. is not the end of class. 2:30 is end of class, but 2 p.m. will give me time to check them and get them in for you. This will be a graded assignment. It will be graded upon participation and accuracy. So, did you answer the questions properly? And did you do it? You will get a grade for that in the grade book. Today's participation in this Zoom session will be a grade for today's class too, a Zoom participation grade. So thank you all for joining in and doing this today because you're only helping your own grade. Next, there is a UTI virtual field trip of the PA campus tomorrow. I'm going to send that link out for it in Schoology tomorrow. I have to get the link from the guy. I'm going to do a little research, get it set up, and I'm going to post it in Schoology by tomorrow, by class time. That will be your assignment tomorrow. Yes, I know we've talked to the Universal Technical Institute guy. I know a lot of you joined in and saw the presentation the other week from UTI at the campus in Mooresville, North Carolina. This one I thought would be intriguing to you guys because it is a virtual field trip and some demonstrations done at the Pennsylvania campus, about 3.5 hours away from here. We currently have an alumni student that is going to school there and seems to be doing pretty well from the last time I heard there. It's a beautiful school. They're a great facility. So I want you guys, instead of being able to take, since I can't take you on these field trips like I have in the past, this is going to be the way that I am going to make sure that you get to explore post-secondary options. We have to make the best out of it. So I'm going to work on getting this field trip link set up for you guys so you guys can do that. That is your assignment for tomorrow. So you have the rest of today, the rest of class today, and class tomorrow until 2 o'clock to do a little research, answer these questions for me, these review questions, and get them submitted to me. All right, I know you guys can do that. And tomorrow to check in and make sure that I have the link up and participate in the virtual field trip and live demonstrations at UTI Exton, PA campus. I will email this to you, and like I said, post it as a file in Schoology. Now, let me get off my screen here. There we go. All right. So now, does anybody have any questions? If you do, please, go ahead. I'll open the chat box up, see if there's anything in there. Here's one down here I see. Let me open the chat box. I have an off-topic question. What could cause a brake fluid light even if it is full and has been sitting for a week or two? Well, it's not completely off topic. We're talking about fluids and things. So a brake fluid light could be on for various reasons. If the fluid's low, obviously, but you're stating that the fluid is full, the sensor or switch could possibly be faulty. Sometimes what happens is, if they were low for a while and you put fluid in it, the switch actually sticks. So what I mean by that is the switch will actually be maybe stuck for so long that when you move it, it doesn't move and open the contacts. What that's doing is there's electrical contacts in there, and when that plunger gets to a point where it's too low, it pushes those contacts together, creates a complete path for the electrical circuit, turns the lights on the dash, or signals the control module to turn the light on the dash. What's happening sometimes is even though that's full and that float has moved, it does not open the contacts. So a simple check that you could do is take a screwdriver handle or something like that. Don't take a hammer or anything crazy like that. I usually just take the end of a screwdriver handle and tap on the reservoir where the switch is. So if you look in the reservoir on the master cylinder, let me do this real quick for you to answer this question. So if yours may look different than this, but here is the switch for the low brake fluid on this vehicle. What I like to do sometimes is take a screwdriver handle and I'll just tap right by the switch. I'm not crushing it. I'm not trying to break it. I just tap by the switch while the vehicle is on and see if the light goes out or if it flickers. If it does, then you know that this was sticking and you probably should replace the switch. If it doesn't go out and it still has a problem, the switch could still be faulty, and there are further tests that you can do to test the switch with a DVOM or digital multimeter to check resistance across these terminals and different things like that. That you would be able to find specific processes for your car in ProDemand or in a service manual for diagnosing that. But a quick check for that one would be, first thing I would do is tap on it and see if you could get it to change, and then you would know that possibly you have a faulty switch. All right, so let me get my chat box up again. I don't see any other questions on here. As always, guys, I'm always open. If you have a question, shoot me an email. If I don't have an answer, I'll try to get you an answer. If you have a question about the assignment, you don't understand it, what the requirements are, shoot me an email. All right, and I will take care of it for you guys. All right, I'd say call the school, but today we're at home. Tomorrow and Friday, I'll be back at the school doing lessons from there. So check in, keep up the good work. I appreciate you guys joining in. It means a lot to me. Proud of you guys making this work. All right, so hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Get that assignment done. Check for the link for the UTI field trip tomorrow, and have a good one. All right, Wortman out.